In the stake, the crystalline spires of the void hegemony's capital world stretched toward the purple sky like frozen lightning. Within the largest tower, the Council of Dominion gathered for what they believed would be their final war meeting of the decade. 7 different species sat around the obsidian table, each representing worlds that had fallen under the hegemony's iron grip over the past 3 centuries. Commander Zix-9, a towering insectoid with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected. The chamber's pale light stood before the holographic display. The blue marble of Earth rotated slowly, looking deceptively peaceful against the backdrop of space. Distinguished council members, Zix-9 began, his translator converting his chittering speech into the common galactic tone. I present to you our final target in this sector, the human homeworld of Earth. The assembled council leaned forward. With interest, War Commander Threk, whose species resembled walking trees with bark-like skin, spoke first. These humans have been sending radio signals into space for barely 2 centuries. Surely they pose no threat to our expansion? Zix-9's mandibles clicked in what his species considered amusement. Indeed, our intelligence reports indicate they have achieved basic spaceflight only recently. They have a single space station, primitive chemical rockets, and their largest. Cities contain fewer than 20 million inhabitants. Most remarkably, they appear to be confined entirely to their home system. General Voss, a reptilian creature with scales that shifted color based on mood, displayed deep purple satisfaction. How refreshingly simple. After the Suntorii resistance and the vegan technological challenges, conquering a pre-contact species will be almost therapeutic. The hologram expanded to show Earth's solar system. Zix-9 gestured with 2 of his arms, while the other 2 manipulated the display controls. Our battle plan is straightforward. We jump our primary fleet directly to Earth's orbit, demonstrate our superior firepower by eliminating their space infrastructure, and demand immediate surrender. Based on our psychological profiles, humans appear to be an emotional species that values individual life highly. A show of overwhelming force should result in capitulation within their measurement of ours. Admiral Keth, whose aquatic species required an environmental suit filled with methane-rich atmosphere, bubbled approval through her translator. The Council has allocated 2,847 vessels for this operation. Surely excessive for such primitive opponents, but it will serve as a demonstration to any other species considering resistance. The vote was unanimous. Within 6 standard time units, the largest invasion fleet in hegemony history departed for the Sol system, confident they were about to add another easy victory to their expanding empire. 3 weeks later, Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the U.E.'s Defiance, watching her tactical display as unknown vessels began dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of their solar system. Her calm brown eyes took in the formation data streaming across multiple screens while their crew worked with quiet efficiency around her. Ma'am, we're receiving a general broadcast on all frequencies, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station. Sarah nodded. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled with an electronic voice that had been processed through translation software. Primitive inhabitants of the 3rd planet. This is Commander Zix-9 of the Void Hegemony. Your system has been selected for integration into our empire. You will surrender all military assets immediately and prepare for occupation. Resistance will result in the complete elimination of your species. You have 1 rotation of your planet to comply. The bridge fell. Silent. Sarah could feel her crew's eyes on her, waiting for her response. She had been preparing for this moment her entire career, though she had hoped it would never come. Rodriguez, open all channels. Broadcast on every frequency they used, plus our own emergency networks. Channels open, Captain. Sarah's voice remained perfectly calm, professional, almost conversational. Commander Zix-9, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth Space Force. Your fleet has entered our system with hostile intent and issued threats against our civilian population. You have made two critical errors. First, you assumed we are primitive. Second, you assumed we are helpless. You now have 30 minutes to begin immediate withdrawal from our system. This is your only warning. In the command ship of the Hegemony fleet, 6-9's compound eyes reflected bewilderment. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged what could only be described as the galactic equivalent of confused glances. Did that primitive just give us an ultimatum? War Commander Threk's translated voice carried clear disbelief. Impossible, General. Voss replied, her scales shifting to the orange of irritation. Our intelligence indicated they barely have weapons capable of reaching their own moon. 6-9 studied his tactical display. Earth appeared defenseless, just as the reports had indicated. A few satellites, a small space station, and what appeared to be construction debris scattered throughout the inner system. Perhaps their translation. Systems are malfunctioning, he decided. Proceed with the attack plan. Target their orbital installations first. The Hegemony fleet began its approach, engines blazing as they accelerated toward Earth. They never saw the trap they were flying into. The first indication something was wrong came when the construction debris in the asteroid belt suddenly came alive. What had appeared on sensors to be inert chunks of rock and metal revealed themselves as massive defense platforms, their stealth systems powering down to reveal weapons that should have been impossible for a single planet species to construct. Rail guns that accelerated projectiles to significant fractions of light speed opened fire. The kinetic rounds, each weighing several tons, tore through the Hegemony's forward ships like paper. Nuclear mines that had been disguised as asteroids for decades began detonating in carefully calculated sequences, creating fields of destructive energy that claimed dozens of vessels. Impossible. 6-9 screamed as his formation began taking casualties. How could they have weapons in their asteroid belt? Our scouts reported nothing but rocks. His sensor operator, a nervous creature whose species communicated through color. Changes in their skin flashed rapid patterns of alarm. Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from their moon. On the bridge display, Earth's moon began to transform. Vast sections of what appeared to be lunar surface retracted, revealing weapon batteries that dwarfed anything in the Hegemony's arsenal. Lance beams of coherent energy reached across space, each shot precisely targeted to disable rather than destroy. But the true shock came when the human fleet decloaked. They materialized from everywhere at once. From behind planets, from within. The gas giants' rings, from positions that should have been empty space. Hundreds of warships appeared, their hulls bearing the scars of battles fought in distant stars. Their designs clearly evolved from centuries of combat experience. These weren't the crude chemical rockets their intelligence had reported. These were warships built by a species that had clearly been fighting and winning battles across the galaxy for generations. "This is Captain Shun," came the calm voice over their communications. "Commander 6-9, you are now surrounded by the 3rd, 7th, and 12th Fleets of the United Earth Space Force. Your vessels are targeted by approximately 4,000 weapon systems. You have lost 47 ships and suffered critical damage to 63 more. We could have destroyed your entire fleet in the opening salvo, but we chose to demonstrate restraint." 6-9's hands trembled as he accessed the classified sections of the galactic database, files he had dismissed as irrelevant to their mission. The information was there, buried in reports from species throughout this arm of the galaxy. Accounts of helpful traders who offered advanced technology in exchange for peaceful cooperation. Descriptions of mysterious ships that appeared during pirate attacks, driving off raiders with overwhelming firepower before disappearing again. Records of entire slaver operations vanishing overnight their captives found safely on nearby worlds with no explanation of how they had been freed. Asterisk. All of them described the same thing. Humans. Sir, his communications officer reported with obvious terror. I'm receiving priority messages from the home worlds. The 2nd, 5th, and 9th hegemony fleets are reporting human vessels appearing in their systems. They're demanding the immediate release of all conquered species and the withdrawal of hegemony forces. The truth hit Zix-9 like a physical blow. Earth wasn't humanity's home world. It was their fortress. The species they had dismissed as primitive had been quietly exploring, expanding, and establishing defensive networks throughout this entire section of the galaxy for centuries. Every trading mission had been reconnaissance. Every rescue operation had been a test of their capabilities. They hadn't declared war on a primitive species trapped on a single world. They had declared war on a spacefaring civilization that had been preparing for this exact scenario for generations. Captain Chun, Zix-9's voice carried none of its earlier confidence. We were not aware of your true capabilities. Our intelligence was clearly flawed. Your intelligence was exactly what we wanted you to believe, Sarah replied. For 300 years, the hegemony has conquered species after species, enslaving civilizations and strip mining worlds. We've been watching. We've been preparing. And we've been waiting for you to make the mistake of threatening Earth. Around the hegemony fleet, space began to fill with more ships. Not just human vessels, but craft from dozens of species, all flying in formation with the Earth forces. The Altarians, who the hegemony had believed they had conquered decades ago. The Centaurians, supposedly subjugated and enslaved. Species after species that had allegedly fallen under hegemony rule now appeared as free allies of humanity. The choice is yours, Commander, Sarah continued. Surrender now, release every species under your control, and face justice for your crimes. Or continue fighting and discover exactly why every intelligent species that has encountered humanity has chosen to become our ally rather than our enemy. Zix-9 looked at his tactical display, seeing his fleet surrounded and outgunned by forces that outnumbered them 10-1. Ships that were clearly more advanced, operated by crews with centuries of combat experience, backed by the industrial capacity of dozens of worlds. The surrender order felt like poison in his mouth, but he gave. Anyway, the Void Hegemony's expansion had ended not with conquest, but with the humbling realization that they had been the primitives all along. Asterisk. The reckoning news of the hegemony fleet's surrender at Earth spread through galactic communication networks, faster than light itself. On worlds throughout the galaxy, species that had lived in fear of the expanding empire suddenly dared to hope. But the true scope of what was coming would not be understood until human ships began appearing in systems throughout. Hegemony Space. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the UE's Retribution, watching as his task force dropped out of hyperspace. At the edge of the Kepler 442 system, the industrial world of Mordheim hung before them, its surface scarred by massive strip mining operations that had been stripping the planet bare for decades. According to their intelligence, over 2 million. Enslaved Zephyrians were working in conditions that barely qualified as survivable. Admiral, reported Commander Lisa Park from the sensor station, I'm detecting 43 hegemony patrol ships in orbit, plus defensive platforms around the primary mining installations. Marcus nodded grimly. Unlike the massive fleet that had threatened Earth, these were older ships, designed more for intimidation than actual combat. Signal the fleet. Begin Liberation Protocol 7. Around them, 96 human warships moved into attack formation. These weren't the defensive platforms that had surprised the hegemony at Earth. These were the deep space fleets that had been operating in secret for generations. Ships designed for exactly this kind of operation. The hegemony commander in the System, a reptilian named Sub-Commander Vex, received the standard human warning with the same dismissive attitude that had doomed Zix-9's fleet. His response was to order an immediate attack on what he assumed were inferior ships. The battle lasted exactly 11 minutes. Human lance weapons carved through Hegemony's shields as if they weren't there. Kinetic bombardment rounds fired from distances that should have been impossible to target accurately struck defensive installations with surgical precision. Most remarkably, every shot was calculated to disable rather than destroy, minimizing casualties even among their enemies. As the last Hegemony ship drifted helplessly in orbit, its weapons destroyed but life support intact, Marcus opened communications to the surface. This is Admiral Webb of the United Earth Space Force. Attention all Hegemony ground commanders. Your fleet has been neutralized and your orbital defenses destroyed. You are now surrounded by forces that outnumber you 50 to 1. Surrender immediately and release all enslaved populations, or we will demonstrate why the galaxy learned not to threaten innocent beings. But the real message wasn't directed at the Hegemony forces. Using communication frequencies provided by their Zephyrian allies, Marcus broadcast directly to the enslaved populations. People of Zephyr, this is the human fleet. Your long nightmare is over. We are here to bring you home. On the surface of Mordheim, in the massive slave barracks that housed millions of workers, beings who had not dared to hope for freedom in generations suddenly looked up at screens showing human ships in orbit. Species that had been told their homeworlds were destroyed discovered that their families were alive and waiting for them on hidden colonies that humanity had been secretly protecting for decades. The liberation of Mordheim was repeated across 47 Hegemony systems in the span of a single week. Each time, human fleets appeared with overwhelming force, neutralized resistance with minimal casualties, and began the process of freeing enslaved populations. Each time, the galaxy learned a little more about what humanity had really been doing for the past 5 centuries. They had not been hiding on Earth, primitive and afraid. They had been building the largest underground resistance network in galactic history. On the Hegemony capital world, the Council of Dominion met in emergency session. The holographic display showed red icons throughout their territory as system. After system reported human fleets in orbit, Hegemony forces neutralized, and slave populations being evacuated to freedom. How is this possible? War Commander Threk's bark-like skin had taken on the gray pallor of shock. Our intelligence networks reported no human presence beyond their home system. General Voss, her scales now displaying the deep black of despair, gestured helplessly at the tactical display. Because they were better at this game than we were. While we were conquering and enslaving, they were infiltrating and preparing. Every trader who visited our worlds, every rescue ship that appeared during accidents, every mysterious benefactor who helped refugees escape... It was all them. The truth was becoming undeniable as reports continued streaming in. The humans hadn't just been exploring space. They had been conducting the largest covert operation in galactic history. For centuries, they had been secretly evacuating endangered species, establishing hidden colonies for refugees, and building a network of allies that spanned thousands of worlds. The species Hegemony thought they had conquered had merely been relocated, their populations safely hidden on worlds the Hegemony didn't even know existed. The resistance movements that had appeared on occupied worlds weren't spontaneous uprisings. They were coordinated operations supported by human intelligence and equipment. Admiral Keth, her methane-rich suit fogging with the equivalent of cold sweat, reviewed the latest intelligence reports. According to our analysts, human ships have been observed in over 300 systems that we believed were uninhabited. They have apparently been conducting their own colonization efforts parallel to our expansion, staying just ahead of our scouts and establishing hidden outposts throughout this entire galactic arm. Commander Zix-9, who had been recalled to the capital in disgrace after his surrender at Earth, finally spoke. I have been analyzing the battle recordings from our engagement. Their fleet composition, their tactical formations, their ship designs. These are not the products of a species that recently achieved spaceflight. Some of their vessels show battle damage from conflicts that must have occurred centuries ago. The Council fell silent as the implications sank in. They had not encountered a primitive species taking its first steps into space. They had stumbled into a trap set by a spacefaring civilization that had been fighting and winning wars across the galaxy since before the hegemony even existed. Sir, the Council's intelligence coordinator interrupted. I'm receiving a general broadcast from Earth. It's being transmitted on all known frequencies throughout our territory. The chamber's speakers activated, and Captain Sarah Chun's calm voice filled the room. People of the galaxy, this is Captain Chun of the United Earth Space Force, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Liberation Alliance. For 3 centuries, the Void Hegemony has spread fear and slavery throughout this region of space. They have conquered innocent worlds, enslaved entire populations, and believed that might makes right. The display showed images of human ships throughout hegemony space, but also something that chilled the Council to their cores. Dozens of other species vessels, all flying in formation with the human fleets. Asterisk. Today, that ends, Sarah continued. The liberation of all hegemony-controlled worlds has begun. Every enslaved being will be freed. Every conquered species will be offered the choice to rebuild their civilizations. And every hegemony war criminal will face justice for their crimes. But then her tone shifted, becoming almost conversational. We want to be clear about something. Humanity does not seek conquest. We do not want an empire. What we want is simple: a galaxy where species can develop freely, where the strong protect the weak, and where cooperation replaces conquest. Images on the display changed, showing vast space stations under construction, worlds being terraformed, and different species working together on projects that dwarfed anything the hegemony had ever attempted. To any species currently part of the hegemony's empire, you have a choice. Join us willingly in building something better, and you will be welcomed as equals. Continue the old ways of conquest and slavery, and you will discover exactly why every species that has met humanity has chosen friendship over conflict. To the leaders of the hegemony specifically, you have 72 hours to surrender yourselves for trial. After that time, we will come and collect you ourselves. We are humanity. We have been preparing for this moment for 5 centuries. And we are very, very good at finding people who don't want to be found. Commander Zix-9 looked around the council chamber at faces displaying fear, despair, and the dawning realization that their empire was not just ending, but had been ending for decades without them even knowing it. They had been playing a game where their opponents were always 3 moves ahead, and only now were they seeing the board clearly. Within hours, member species throughout the hegemony began declaring independence and requesting protection from the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Fleets that had been loyal to the hegemony for generations suddenly found themselves outnumbered by their own crews, as soldiers who had never questioned orders began asking why they were fighting to maintain a system built on slavery and conquest. Void hegemony, which had once controlled over 400 star systems and seemed destined to dominate this entire galactic arm, collapsed in less than a month. Not through conquest, but through the simple realization that there was a better way to live. 6 months later, the former Council of Dominion sat in a comfortable detention facility on Earth, awaiting their war crimes trials. They were treated well, fed regularly, and allowed to communicate with their families. It was, they had to admit, far better treatment than they had ever given their own prisoners. Commander Zix-9 stood at the window of his cell, looking out at the bustling cityscape. of New Geneva. Humans and dozens of other species walked the streets together, working on projects he could barely comprehend. In the sky above, ships from throughout the galaxy came and went, carrying trade goods, scientific data, and refugees to new homes. A human guard approached, a young woman with kind eyes who brought his daily meal. "The human delegation wants to know if you'd be willing to testify about hegemony operations," she said gently. "Not for leniency in your own case, but to help us understand how to prevent this kind of empire from forming again." Zix-9 looked at her with his compound eyes, seeing no hatred, no desire for revenge, just a genuine desire to make the galaxy a better place. "You really don't understand conquest, do you?" he asked. The guard smiled sadly. "We understand it perfectly. We just learned something better." Outside his window, Earth's moon was visible in the afternoon sky. No longer a hidden fortress bristling with weapons, but a civilian construction hub where beings from 100 worlds worked together to build ships, designed for exploration rather than war. The galaxy had declared war on humanity and discovered, too late, what they truly were. Not conquerors to be feared, but protectors who had been waiting centuries for the chance to build something better than Empire. And in star systems throughout the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for generations began to dream of tomorrow. Asterisk.